All right, so the last time we were talking about a script and we defined it as a mental representation of an event. And so it's like a schema in the sense that it lives in your nodes, in your long term memory. Um, I'm sorry, it's represented by nodes living in your long term memory. And once again, a script is this idea that in our mind, we have this idea of how it's going to play out. So let me give you an example of how a social situation could play out. So let's say that you are on a first date with someone that you care about. And as a first date, you and your date walk up to the door to say goodnight to each other. And what you have to do now is you have to figure out, do you give this person you went on a date on a kiss or not? Or do you try it? So what's going to happen is in your mind, you have to make a decision about going in for this kiss or not. And what's going to happen is you're going to have several scripts that all are being kind of primed at once. So script number one, for example, could be that you just close your eyes and go in for this kiss. All right. Step number two is you wait to see what your date is doing. Is he or she jiggling the keys but not putting the keys in the door? Are they touching your hand? And then if the answer is yes, you go for the kiss. Another script would be the same thing, but if the answer is no, then you don't. So and what's going to happen is all of these scripts are going to get enabled at the same time. And what we're doing mentally is we evaluate each script. You say, based on the information I have, this script wins, the other ones do not. And priming is the thing that starts the script. So remember, if I showed you a picture of something, you're going to be primed. Through spreading activation, other things in your memory are going to also, other nodes are also going to start to fire off. Once you meet a certain threshold, that's going to get to the scripts that are being evaluated, and the one that wins is the one that'll predict behavior. All right, so let me give you an example of how the whole process works here. So let's say you watched a movie that had somebody holding a gun. By seeing that gun, that's your node being active. Now, you just see the gun. You don't see them do anything with it. But gun is related to shoot, and all that's related to kill, and all that's related to hurt. These are related to. That's related to harm, obviously. And see all these arrows I'm drawing, or all these lines? That is what's called spreading activation. All right, so these things are being spreading activation. Now, what's going to happen is after a number of nodes gets used, or once it meets a threshold, and let's say in this case 5 is the threshold. We don't really know the threshold, so let's say it's 5. What's going to happen then is it's going to get to various scripts. So let's say the script in this case is you could, if someone, let's say, all right, so you just watch this movie. Let's say someone says something mean to you. All right, so let's say you're watching a movie with a bunch of people. The person next to you says something like, you're an idiot. I don't know, something mean. What's going to happen then is one script is to ignore it. One script is to make fun of them and just be like, haha, that's silly, you're an idiot. Or another script would be to retaliate against them. All right, so those are your 3 options. You're running through evaluating which one's the most appropriate, and those are your scripts. And the script that wins is going to be based on what you're primed with. And if you're primed with gun, shooting, killing, whatever, then that's going to relate to your relational script, and that's going to predict behavior. So let's be clear on the steps here. Oh, sorry. So here are the 5 steps in order. So first, your schemas are primed. That's 1. After you're primed, remember spreading activation occurs. After spreading activation occurs, you have to reach a threshold. What's important to note here is that sometimes spreading activation isn't enough. Sometimes that we don't meet that threshold, and so therefore it just kind of fizzles out. So you have to meet this threshold via spreading activation. All right, so that's number 3. So 1 is your primed. Number 2 is spreading activation. Number 3 is if you reach this threshold, then scripts get active, just like I talked about. Multiple scripts get activated. And step 4 is they each get evaluated. And then finally, the winning script is the one that predicts your behavior, and that's step 5. So you can see a clear kind of progression from just me showing you a picture all the way to predicting your behavior. Now, remember, this is low effort. Now, you may be saying to yourself, oh my gosh, Chris, look at all these steps. There's so much going on here. And that's true. There is a lot of stuff going on here, but it often happens without you knowing about it. It happens without your awareness. Imagine if that wasn't the case. Every time someone said hi to you, just walking down the street, someone says hi, no one just stops and be like, oh, I'm primed. How many nodes are being activated? 1, 2, 3, 4, 18, 19, 20. Oh, that's threshold. Now the scripts. Oh, the script is say hi back. Okay, that one wins. Hi. Like, no one does that. Think about how long a conversation would take if that were the case. So this happens with very little awareness, and it happens very, very fast. You can actually evaluate scripts simultaneously. Like, we have that ability to evaluate these things simultaneously. And it's actually kind of a neat process how this all works. Now, remember that in order for this to be important, it has to predict behavior. And in fact, step 5 says behavior needs to occur. So let me show you a study that went from 1 to 5. Now, it didn't measure every single step, but it started at 1 and went to 5. All right, so this is a study by Barge and his colleagues in 1996. Remember, I will never, ever ask you about years, but I do reserve the right to test you about names of people who did these famous studies. So this is Barge, and what he did is he did a sentence unscrambling task. All right, and so a sentence unscrambling task, let's get to that first, is something like this. If I were to say, house the blue big is. All right, let's say those words were presented in that order. House the blue big is. You would have to rearrange that to make a sentence. Like, the blue house is big. So all I did was rearrange the words. All right, that's what a sentence unscrambling task is. And participants were given this task to do. So they had to unscramble these words to make a sentence. Now, here's the deal, though. Participants were randomly assigned one of 3 conditions. Rude words in the sentence, polite words were in the sentence, and neutral words were in the sentence. All right? So they had to unscramble sentences. Everyone did that. But what words they saw were one of these 3 conditions. Now, this is a way we prime them. Remember, priming doesn't have to be up pictures. Priming just has to be you see the word. All right. Now, what they did, the dependent variable is after they got done with this sentence unscrambling task, they were done. The researcher, the participant will look over, and the researcher was just chatting with somebody else, kind of like by the door. They're sitting there chatting about their day, about the weather, about their life. Who knows? They were chatting. And so the question is how long did it take? How many seconds, sorry. How many seconds did it take for the participant to interrupt the experimenter, to say, hey, I'm done? How long did it take? And what they found is that those in the rude condition, that's this condition here, they were significantly faster. They took about 6 minutes or so, right? They took about 6 minutes to interrupt. But those in the neutral condition and the polite condition took about a little under 10 minutes. And this is significantly different. This group here is significantly different from the other 2. And these 2 did not differ from each other. So what this tells us is that if you're primed with rudeness, you see all these rude words, then when given the opportunity, you will also be rude by interrupting the experimenter earlier than the other 2 conditions do. Now, that's kind of a cool sorry, I'm a little under the weather. But that's kind of a cool effect if you think about it, So what's happening theoretically is they're primed with these words. All right, they're primed. What's going to happen is you see the words rude, bother, aggressive, and that's going to engage spreading activation. And then let's say they're done with the task. Their nodes are spreading activation. Then what's going to happen is once they reach a threshold, certain scripts are going to be active. Remember, at this point, the participant's just waiting there, like, hey, is this experimenter ever going to come over here? And their scripts are going to be active and evaluated. And those in the rude condition, the script that wins is going to be the script that says interrupt them, stop their conversation, and get over here. Those in the polite and neutral condition don't have that active. Now, one thing I would have loved to have seen, although they did not, is you would think that this would be higher. You would think that this would be higher, like this. Because if they're primed with politeness, you would think that they would last a lot longer before they interrupted the experimenter. But that actually isn't what happened, and that's fine. But it does show the effect of at least priming as it relates to the rude condition. Now, in a second study, what they did is they did the same type of task, but instead of they wanted to basically show this effect again. So they wanted to show that the priming effects they found weren't just a fluke. So they actually did two other studies. This is study 2A and study 2B. It was the same study. They just wanted to replicate it. So it was just called study 2. And what they did is instead of rude versus polite, what they did is they used elderly primes. All right. So words that you think of when you think of old people, old, wise, Florida, stuff like that. And then, so some people got that, randomly assigned to get that. Some people randomly assigned to get the same neutral words they got before. Then what they did is after they were done with the sentence and scrambling task, the researcher said, we're going to continue with the study. What I need you to do is just walk down the hallway into the other room, and then we'll get you started. Now, this dependent variable here is the amount of time in seconds it takes you to walk from one room to the other down the hallway. And what they found in two studies is that if you were primed with the old people words, you walked significantly slower than if you saw the neutral words, because old people walk slow. I thought that was interesting, right? It's like you're primed with something and it predicts your behavior. You're primed with old peopleness, and how do you act? You walk slow like they do. How messed up is that? That's so weird that it would predict your behavior to that mundane type of level, but it does. And that's what's really neat about this type of study, is that when you're dealing with priming, what this study and study 1 showed is that sure enough, if you prime people with certain words or pictures or whatever, it's going to predict behavior consistent with the spreading activation, the other scripts that get tested, and the script that wins. All right. So that's really cool about the script piece. When we come back, we're going to talk about some other low effort processes in this chapter.